All right. So we will have the video. Peter will upload it. I will put it on jeffrey.com show note as well for you. All the links for everything I'm going to mention, and for the, for example, for the culture map that I already mentioned, everything is going to be there, and a place to comment for ratings, and an amazing raffle for thanking you for being there. I will mention the raffle in the end, but it's definitely worth going there. So yeah. As I already mentioned, my roots are deep in development. I'm a Java developer. That was my first programming language, and the programming language that I used most of my career. But also, as I mentioned, now I work with the company that does DevOps tooling. So I'm kind of a spy in this DevOps world, and I want to share with you, with my people, with the developers, what I learned from this other bizarre world. To understand where it all started, we need to go back 10 years and look at one of the most important books on DevOps, the Phoenix Project. I hope you read it. If not, I definitely recommend you to read it. Obviously, the link is in the show notes, as you already know. And to understand the approach of the author in particular, and the ops people in general, to DevOps, we want to look at the cover of the book. You know, judge the book by its cover. This is what we say. So let's judge the book by its cover. On the cover, we'll see people who are the main character of the book. So let's look who this book is about. Patty McKee, she's the director of IT service support. She's an IT person. She's an ops person. Wes Davis, director of distributed technology ops, obviously ops person. Sarah, she's in sales. Steve, he's the CEO. Dick, he's the CFO. Bill is the main character. He is the protagonist. The plot of this book is that things are very bad in the car parts company that they all work with for, and then Bill invents DevOps and transforms the entire organization and basically wins with DevOps. So he invents DevOps, that's the main character, and he is VP of IT Ops. That's another ops guy. We have Eric, who is a board member, and then we have Brand, lead sysadmin. Now, Brand, he is the most important technical authority in the book, and he is a system administrator, ops guy, obviously. And then we have John, who is the chief information security officer. Now, do you see who is not on the cover? Who is missing? No developers. The most important book, the most important story in the history of DevOps merely mentioned developers in the book, and not in very flattering light. And not a single developer is in the list of the main characters. So this gives you a clue. Let's go deeper. This is the second book that you read when you learn about DevOps, the DevOps Handbook. There are 4 authors. Gene Keen is the author of the Phoenix Project. We already know everything we need to know about him. There are 3 other important, amazing people: Jez Humble, Patrick Dubois, John Willis. Let's look what their background is. Patrick Dubois is a system architect. He is an ops guy. Jez Humble was a deputy director of delivery architecture. He dealt with delivery. Delivery is an ops concept. John Willis was VP of services in a company called Ops Code. It's a company that does tooling for ops. They are all ops people. So 2 of the most important books are written by ops people and preaching for DevOps from the perspective of how it makes the life of ops easier. Now let's see who else teaches us what DevOps is. You go to Google, you type what DevOps is, and this is the list. First, New Relic. New Relic, company that deals with observability. It's an ops concept. This is what they do. Next, Amazon Web Services. Cannot get any more ops than a platform, than a cloud platform. And then CollabNet, well, they have some developer, they are the exception. the Agile admin, system administration, obviously, Wikipedia, Atlassian, a lot of ops tools, and then again, Azure, yet another cloud platform for ops. And then in the bottom, you can see logs.io. That's another logs and monitoring company ops tools. So basically, I hope by now you can see that whenever someone says DevOps, they actually mean ops. And here we need to understand why. To understand why, let's look what people think the DevOps actually is. So here's a question on Quora. How do I switch my job from system administrator to DevOps? And this is one of the most upvoted examples. Take a look at the DevOps writing on the avatar of Disha. And then Disha, I think she's a she, but I'm not sure, but let's assume. Disha goes into explanation of what is required, Linux fundamentals, cloud computing, and then basically you need to learn something called Gits. So the basic idea is you learn a bunch of stuff, including Gits, and then instead of system administrator, you are DevOps. Not only that you switch to be DevOps, you also get much more money. So this is the system administrator salaries. DevOps engineer salaries are at least a third more. And it actually, this move from sysadmins to DevOps also supported by HR. You can see the demand for DevOps engineers, almost more than 14,000 jobs in the US only. And then all the industry of training catches up, and now we have certified DevOps engineers certifications. So you might think, okay, I think I got it. They invented it to rename themselves and actually get more money. But this is actually a wrong assignment, a wrong way of looking at things, because you confuse cause and effect. And you confuse cause and effect because no one knew that DevOps engineer will be in demand and DevOps engineer will be hot and will be well paid 10 years ago when those amazing luminaries wrote the Phoenix projects and the DevOps Handbook. This cannot be, the salaries and the demand cannot be the cause, because they, back in the day when they invented it, it did not exist. So we need to look deeper. And for that, here is a clue. This is the infinity loop. That's the diagram of what DevOps actually is. You can see, you plan, you code, you build, you test. That's kind of the dev part of the house. And then you release, deploy, orchestrate, and monitor. That's the ops side of the house. And then you go and do it once more. And I don't know how many of you see a similarity here, but this looks very, very familiar. And it looks almost like the Agile diagram, which also includes all that, but on top of what we already do as Agile developers, DevOps adds all the concept of ops for us to take care of. So what they did is they said, you know what? Now the developers are going to do DevOps. Instead of only doing their part of dev, let them care about ops as well. And to prove this point, here are more. So the most important document, or one of the most important documents in the DevOps world, is the State of DevOps report. This is a very serious scientific report built by Dr. Nicole Forsgren together with Jez Humble and Jim Kim, the people that wrote the Phoenix project and the DevOps Handbook. And this report assesses where the organizations are in their DevOps journey, not ops journey, DevOps. They measure everything. How do they measure it? Well, they use stuff like what happened after you deploy code. sorry, after you wrote the code, when you deployed. What happened after you commit the code? What happened if you have unplanned outages? What happens with degradation service? Every concept that they spoke about in DevOps report, at least 2018, was about what happened after you finish writing code. All those are ops concepts. Just to add to that, let's look at what work they describe in the DevOps DevOps state of DevOps report. So you see here the list, and obviously new work is the most important, but there are others. Let's see what the others are. So planned work, this is where the money is. New projects, fine. We understand it as developers, it makes sense. Internal projects, server migrations, software updates. That's not something developers do. And then changes, okay, it doesn't specify which changes. Unplanned work, support escalations and emergency outages. This is not something developers do. So this all is very important, very interesting, but has very little to do with the developers. Our job is very easy. It's either we write new features, or we fix bugs, or we do refactoring. This is all. New work, bug fixes, refactoring. No server migrations, no software updates, no unplanned outages. Very, very simple. And all the concepts that the DevOps reports speak about are ops concepts. So by now, I hope I proved that ops is an elaborate plot of the ops people, DevOps, of the ops people against us, the developers, to offload their work on us. Now, let's talk about what is our work. If DevOps is not our work, what is? For that, we can look, for example, as a manifesto of software craftsmanship, just because they very nicely combined a very high standard for the developers, for software craftsmen people to actually excel. What are they talking about? Well-crafted software, steadily added value, community of professionals, productive partnerships. So let's look at it closer. One of the great talks about those concepts were done by Anton Keks in the J-Point conference in Russia, in Moscow last year. And this is one of his slides when he explains what software craftsmanship is. So he speaks about how people should be versatile, how they should be polyglot developers, understand different perspectives of developers, but also, and this is a quote, but also, as an afterthought, as a last bullet, also deployment. And the reason why you care about deployment, not because you care about production, not because you care about ops concepts, but only because you don't want to be called during the night. Fair enough. Let's look at this list most closer. What is software craftsman definition of done? You understand what needs to be done, obviously. Your code is reliable, readable, simple, understandable. Our code is easy to deploy. Non-functional requirements are met. We didn't incur any technical debt and even reduce some. Our test pass. More so, the QA took a look and they're happy. Team lead took a look on our pull requests and they're happy. Product owner took a look and they're happy. And product owner for us is the ambassador of the client, because this is, we get the requirements from the product owner and they take a look, and if they are happy, the client, for us at least, took a look and they are happy. So this is our definition of done, and I hope you all agree. And now I want to run another poll, and here please raise your hand, people who think that there is an inherited conflict between developers and testers when it comes to software development. Perfect. Oh, well, one hand, two hands. Okay, all right. Not a lot of you think so, and I think this is great because frankly, I don't think that myself, and I can explain why. That's because you remember how the definition of software craftsmanship preaches for quality. Actually, QA and testers are people who are helping us adding more quality. Fighting with QA is like fighting with your unit tests. This is insane. Unit tests are there to help you be better. The QA team and the testers are there to help you be better. They provide you with the service that allows you writing higher quality. So, and since higher quality is part of our manifesto, of our definition of done, obviously there is nothing wrong with quality. And if we want quality, let's talk about how quality changed. So if you go back in time, let's say 10 years ago, and we think about quality back then, let's take an example that we as customers care about quality a lot, a banking software and the banking app. I don't know how many of you, but I, for example, switched bank because I didn't like the app of a previous bank. This is how the quality of banking software, client-facing banking software is based. This is the website of Chase 10 years ago. So you can see here, well, it's nice, but there is probably not much you could do back then. And then there is like news and announcements here. And let's say something not unthinkable that 10 years ago, they would put there an announcement of 12 hours maintenance to implement a software upgrade, for rolling out a new version. You will go like, well, it's fine. I guess I don't care. Anyway, I don't use this site very much and there is no app and I go to my bank. So I don't care if it's up or down. But obviously now that's definitely not the case. If your bank will try to pull a stunt like that, you will switch banks in a blink of an eye. So requirements for quality changing. And our world becomes more and more complicated. Code quality now is not enough just because we have so much data. Zettabytes is actually not what comes after petabytes. This is what comes after exabytes. It's like really, really, really a lot of data. And obviously global data sphere is not representative for each and every company, but the more companies have bigger data, the more it's harder for each and every one of them to have what we used to call a staging server. Because the staging server in its classical meaning was an environment which copies the production. This is where we guarantee the quality. This is where we do all the checks. This is how we know that everything will be fine in our definition of done. Remember, our definition of done is we have quality. We used to have a staging server when we reach this quality, and then it's not our problem anymore. Well, we don't have this staging server anymore because it doesn't make sense in terms of money to do that, and sometimes it's just impossible. Think about Google having an environment which is exactly like Google production environment. No, you cannot do that. Obviously, you can say, well, I don't know how to ensure quality, or you can go and ensure quality in production. Ensuring quality in production have many names, and canary deployments and controller rolled out are the biggest, and then it's implemented through canary deployments and also stuff like feature flags. The one term that I really like is blast radius. Blast radius is what happens when you release something and it goes bump and then people suffering. And the idea of controlled rollout is that you reduce the blast radius. You release it to a small portion of your customers, and then you use observability to observe and make decisions. If it worked well, you can release it to more people. And if there was a blast and there are casualties, you roll back or you close the feature with the feature flags or whatever, right? So we have now quality that can be only checked in production. Now, remember, we as developers take responsibility for our quality. And if the quality can only be checked in production, that means that production is now a part of our business. Suddenly, we have to be there where our code is deployed, because you remember, it's going to it's going to explode. Maybe we have the blast radius and we need to fix it, and it's basically now suddenly our business. So welcome to on-call. Now we have to be there to ensure the quality. Now, being on-call means that we need to be able to respond. And to be able to respond, we as the developers now need to make sure that we know how to deploy software, scale software, undeploy software very, very fast. And that means that we have a new requirement from our definition of done. The SRE took a look and they are happy. Who are those mysterious SRE? SRE stands for Site Reliability Engineer or Service Reliability Engineer. And those are the people who make everything tick in production. And since now it's partially our responsibility, we need to work together. What are their requirements? We understand how our code is going to be deployed. It needs to be deployed immediately because something went bump. We need to deploy a hotfix. It needs to be deployable in a predictive way. Our build is reliable, repeatable, and fast for the same reason. We need to build this patch now. This build should pass and it should be very fast. Our code is stateless and scalable because one of the things that can go bump is we don't stand the load. We need to scale up. And this is something that your code needs to be done. Our code starts fast and dies fast. Starts fast, obviously we deployed a new patch. It needs to start immediately, but also dies fast because now we need to kill another misbehaving code and it needs to die fast as well. Our code is observable. This is part of the progressive delivery. We need to be able to make decisions whether this deployment were good or not, and probably doing it automatically. Our code supports feature flags. Sometimes it's just easier to trigger and close some part of functionality with API code. Our code is backwards compatible and forwards compatible. Backwards, obviously, we are going to put a new version out there. Old clients need to be able to speak with it, but we also gonna roll back, and this is where new clients have to speak with an old code, and that's forward compatibility. And our code emits event streams, that's fine. And all this list also looks very familiar. And it looks like something that you might heard about, and it's called the 12-factor apps. And this is kind of the manifest of how cloud native applications should be run. And some people claim that 12-factor app is not enough already, and we have beyond 16, 18, I don't even remember the number, but the list is pretty much this list. And this is not because it's fancy, it's nice, or it's good for your resume. This is because now you are in production and you need to act fast to ensure quality, which I remind you is your job. There is one more, and this is our code is lean. And by lean, I mean lean in saving money. And now you go like, and how that has to do anything with me? This is an AWS bill. It's very complicated. I don't understand half of it. I don't know what's going on. I don't care about it. But actually your decisions as developer have critical implications on the operating costs. Here's an example. Kafka Summit last year. Uday from SignalFX explains how they implemented Kafka to reduce their cross availability zone network costs by 50%. This is tons of money. And they did it as developers by using developer tools. You don't disagree with me that Kafka is something that we care about as developers. So suddenly, not only we care about the quality in production, we also care about the business. And this is not a burden. This is actually an opportunity, especially now in times of crisis. We hear stuff like we have to cut costs. Well, obviously the normal answer is let's fire the developers. Or in a little bit better scenario, let's cost operational costs that people pay for their coffee. But actually, maybe someone will be smart enough to implement solutions as developer to actually save money and prevent layoff, prevent operational costs, and instead just doing something that will help our business. And if we are talking about business, what business cares about? Business cares about happy customers. What do happy customers want? They want features. When they want them yesterday. How DevOps helps delivering features? Well, this is what DevOps does. If you look at the State of DevOps report, you can see that the biggest advantage of the companies that do DevOps are those four. They deploy 2008 times more frequently than the organizations that do DevOps poorly or don't do that at all. They have 106 times faster lead time from commit to deploy. So not only can they deploy the features faster, they can actually bring them from the code to the hands of their developers faster. And they obviously have better quality with 26,000 times faster time to recover from incidents and 7 times lower change failure rate. Their deployments go bump 7 times more rarely. So obviously bringing value to customers and users, it's something that DevOps excels at. But also security. How do we improve our security? There are 2 ways. The first is we can hire Chief Information Security Officer, so we will have someone to blame and fire when the incident happens. Or we can start be smarter about security and start thinking about how we can actually provide it. And thinking about security vulnerabilities, it's a little bit like thinking about stopping distances. So when you took your driving lessons, you probably remember you have those thinking distance and braking distance concepts, which are completely different in nature. Thinking distance is about like the light from the obstacle hits your retina, fires electrons in your brain, goes to your leg, and this is all the reaction, the thinking distance. And then braking distance is how well your brakes work, the friction and the road and the rubber and all this stuff like chemistry and physics. How do you fight those? Completely different. For braking distance, you come with better alloys for your brake pads, and you make sure that your roads are in a better condition. And for thinking distance, you just replace slow humans with fast machines and you're done. But I mean, those are 2 completely different concepts that together comprises stopping distance. The same with security vulnerabilities. 3 distinguished parts with completely different ways of going about them. These contribute to how fast you will be protected. Identify that you have been breached, fix, and 90% of the time, 80 to 90% of the time, that will be updating dependencies. It might be your operating system or your runtime or dependencies of your code, whatever it is, and then deploy those fixes to production. And this is what DevOps does. And today, with Spectre and Meltdown, some threats are impossible to defeat. The only way to defend against them is once you have a fix, deploy it as fast as possible. And just to remind you, this is what DevOps does. It deploys as fast as possible. So I hope by now you see that DevOps is an evolutionary pressure. DevOps is there not because someone wants to enforce it on you, but just because it's a means to an end, and this end is something that your business cares about. Is the quality, is what's going on? I think my PowerPoint froze. Okay, now you got all of them. It's the quality, is the lean software, it saves money, but it also provides new features and security. So there is no way around it. DevOps is here to stay because business needs it. And the companies that implement DevOps will be more successful than others. So let's talk again what it requires from you. And you remember this diagram, and you remember how I said, well, now you need to do everything. And then you just go like, oh shit, I need to be great in development, which I already am, but I also need to be great in QA and in operations, but also in security and in UX and in product. Well, that's just impossible. I quit. Well, I have some good news for you. And the good news are no one or almost no one can be great in all of them. Those people who know everything about everything, those mythical unicorns that fart rainbows, they are already been hired by Netflix long time ago. Mikita, I know that you are one of them, but I don't know if there are a lot of other people like that. And the good news are you don't have to be. Because if you think that those geniuses are DevOps engineers, you are wrong. DevOps is about collaboration between people with different skills. And this is why the terms DevOps engineers doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense because DevOps engineer, it's like collaboration engineer, and there is no such thing as collaboration engineer, obviously. Instead, we're talking about T-shaped people working in empowered teams. And that means, the T means that you have something that you know really well, and you are developers, this is what you do, and this is great, but you also know enough about other concepts to be able to collaborate with them. This is the idea of DevOps. And there are ops people, the SREs, and they are great in ops, but they understand enough about development to be able to speak with you, etc., etc. So basically, don't be a DevOps engineer, be T-shaped software engineer that have a deep understanding of a lot of concepts, but still developer and have this specialization. Now, more good news, when I started and I showed you how the ops people consider DevOps a completely ops related problem, this changed as well. And I will give you two very profound examples in how this changed. The first is State of DevOps report. I already told you how important it is in the DevOps world, and look at the change comparing to 2018. 2019, the biggest group that took the survey were development or engineering, not the ops people. And if you look at metrics, here it is, software development as a part of the metrics of DevOps. So people who stand behind this report understand that DevOps is not how ops people solve their problems. Instead, it's about all of us. Another profound example, remember the Phoenix project, how there were no developers around and the main character was an ops guy? Well, here is a new book of Jim King. It's called The Unicorn Project. And this is an alternative reality to the same story. It's the same company in trouble, but now the person, the main character, the main protagonist who invents DevOps and saves the company by implementing it is Maxine, and she is a developer. What a change. No developer to the main character and the main protagonist. And you know what? If you get scared by those ops people, what happened to them is also need to make us happier. Now, when they switch from being system administrators to SRE, or another term for that is a platform engineer, now they suddenly treat operations as it was a software problem. It's not that we need now suddenly understand concept of systems administration. It's the other way around. The ops people now treat hardware as software, and now much closer to developers than before. So much close that a lot of them are now this weird creature that are sysadmins in their background, but now write code much more than they wire cables in their data center. So this is great. In the end of the day, yes, DevOps is an ops idea, but as we mentioned, the business likes it. It provides quality, it's lean, it gives competitive advantage, and it provides security. And for us, it's not as bad as it sounds. Now, everything is code, and we obviously love code. So all we need to do is follow the principles and the practices, and this is something that we know how to do because this is what we do for our job as well. So in the end of the day, DevOps is more than okay, and there is no reason for us to be scary about. Instead, we definitely should go ahead and embrace it. And with that, Twitter ads, and we'll go to Q&A. So I'm at Baruch on Twitter. Now you definitely know it's worth following me. And this is SF Jag on Twitter. So when you praise this talk, don't forget to mention our host. DevOps hashtag always brings a lot of attention on Twitter. Recommended. And Jeff.com/show notes. The slide is there. The video, once Peter gives me the video, all the links for all the books, for all the resources, all the DevOps reports, everything is there. And you can see here on the right side the information about the raffle. This takes you to the show notes page, and the raffle this month is 2 Nintendo Switch Lites. You can win one of them. And this is, if you follow, today is a very, very rare gift to get because they are sold out everywhere because of the pandemic and the stay and the shelter in place. That's all I have. And now we have like at least 10 minutes for questions if you have any. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Hey, thanks, Baruch. I just had a couple words I wanted to say as well. If you don't mind, could I share my screen for just a second?
Yeah, go ahead. You can.
Awesome.
I think you can kick me out as a host, so go ahead.
Thank you. I'll flip it back to you in just a moment, of course. So many of you may be Elasticsearch users out there. You know, as Baruch mentioned several times, you know, tooling obviously isn't the whole story here by any stretch of the imagination, but it certainly can help make things a little less scary when you are looking at you know, these additional responsibilities, right, that you've been given, and making sure that you're not only building systems in an observable manner, but having good tools that can help you with observability can take some of the sting out of this additional responsibility that Baruch was talking about. Many of you may or may not realize, you know, I know log analytics are a very popular use case for Elasticsearch. Elastic is hard at work actually building a complete solution because so many people have been using Elastic for log analysis and log analytics. Not only that, metrics, and what we've done recently is we've added a full APM suite, uptime, alerting, machine learning. You know, this is on its way to becoming very well on its way to becoming a full product, very much in the realm of you know, New Relic, App Dynamics, these sorts of things. And so if you haven't checked it out, I encourage you to do so. A lot of this is free and open source. There are some, you know, higher end features that, you know, require purchase, but there's a lot that you can do with the free and open source observability stack from Elastic. You can also run it on our cloud. And if you're interested in doing that, there's a free 14-day trial. And you can also, if you ping me directly on Twitter. I'm just at Peter Humphrey. We can probably get you a 30-day trial as well, or get your trial extended. Just wanted to mention that because I think a lot of people probably don't know. So with that, let me turn the sharing back to you, Baruch.
No, I'm done. I'll just put it there for whoever.
Yeah, put your Twitter
scan the
handle
QR
slide up
code
there, and let's answer questions from folks. Feel free to unmute, and I think we don't have that many people on. I think we can just unmute and go ahead and ask away. So
for sure,
this is your time to ask Baruch whatever you like. Don't all jump at once. If you're feeling like you don't want to talk, I totally respect that. Feel free to just drop your question in the chat. If you're not feeling chatty, verbally speaking.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll give it a minute in case anyone changes their mind. But then.
Yeah, folks, it's completely fine, especially today with the events that are going on. I understand if you are not in the mood for talking or about DevOps or anything else, that's completely fine. It's okay.
Well, we appreciate your time and attention. I will put the recording, I'll get the recording over to Baruch, and we'll get it up on a YouTube channel somewhere. Baruch, it might be fastest if you have a JFrog channel to drop it there. I'll send you the MP4.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I can upload it to YouTube. No,
cool.
No problem at all. I'll do it tomorrow morning, first thing.
Sure thing. All right, great. And yeah, like I mentioned, if you are interested in trying Elastic on the observability front, let me just drop a quick link in for you to follow up. Here, 1 second. You can go to this link that I am dropping into the chat. And like I said, a lot of the functionality is available for you free and open source. Obviously, you can run it in the cloud, and there's a trial for that. So have a check it out. Looks like we do have a question. Yeah.
And we get a question. Perfect timing. Thank you, Michael.
Excellent.
Save this meetup by the bell. Yeah. So, how do you recommend as a developer to get started with being T-shaped in regards to ops or vice versa? The simplest way to do it is just starting to learn about DevOps, and a couple of resources that I mentioned definitely help. You can start with the Phoenix project or the Unicorn project, and then definitely the DevOps Handbook will give you tons of background of how DevOps actually run. There are other wonderful books, some of them from the same authors, some of not. One more example, Jez Humble, one of the co-authors of both the DevOps Handbook and the State of DevOps Report, wrote another great book, I think like 20 years ago by now, The Continuous Delivery. And it's still very, very relevant to read and to understand how this is done. Shameless plug, I was co-author on another book that hopefully will expand your horizon a little bit. It's called The Liquid Software, and I co-author it with two amazing JFrog co-founders, Yoav Landman and Fred Simon. So definitely. And Peter, you're completely right. Talks by Jez Humble, by Nicole, by Andrew Klachaffer, there are so many. And I think if you have time to watch some videos now, all the DevOps Days recordings are, not all of them, but most of them are online on YouTube. Just go and search there for DevOps Days. You'll find tons of them.
Hey, are they running their events online, Baruch?
Yes, they are.
Okay, I figured they would.
I spoke at DevOps Days Kiev like 2 weeks ago, and yeah.
Ooh, yeah, or I'm not sure if I'm going to say his name right, so I'm not going to say it. But we got another good question. I like this one.
Yeah. When you mentioned to start learning DevOps, you mean not only shaping coding skills, but also sysadmin, testing, and soft skills. Are all of them important? Would you give some importance? Oh, this is a great question. Yes. So, you know what? The most important skill for DevOps are soft skills. because DevOps is all about collaboration. It's all in the end of the day about how you go and you speak better with other people that do other stuff. And if you know how to approach the people who do ops, you don't need to be the ops guru yourself. Instead, you will work with them. And the ability to work with people is the key for DevOps. Yes, it's important to understand what is Kubernetes and a high level of how it works, but it's much more important not to be a douchebag and be a good key player and be able to collaborate with people who know Kubernetes better. How about that?
I'm a big fan of the no douchebag policy.
Right.
Yeah.
It's much easier said than done, said the biggest douchebag in this room. For sure.
Indeed. Another good question from Andre.
DevSecOps, next big thing, or do you think that in DevOps the sec part is already one of the important things? Yeah, thank you, Andrew. We hear a lot about DevSecOps. Is this the next big thing? And the funny thing is, one of the co-founders, if not the founder of the term DevSecOps, John Willis, actually refers to it by himself as a marketing stunt. It's a marketing stunt because DevOps already contains security as a very, very important part of the value stream that we talk about in DevOps, the same pipeline that we mentioned, where your code is flowing from us, the developers, all the way to production. The security has to be built in this pipeline. Now, the problem is that we suck in that too bad, so badly that we had to put a special highlight on that, a special searchlight, and find the sec in DevOps. And this is how this term was taken. It's just a matter of highlighting the security, the importance of security in DevOps.
One thought about that as well is I think some of the more modern tools, you go out there and you look at like Sneak and some of the other things, but if you go back, a couple of years to the bigger security suites, they might not have always had like a really CI/CD friendly API in mind, with their design. They just, CI/CD DevOps, like this was an alien concept back then. And depending on the security suite that you're talking to or talking about, your ability to sort of do this in a continuous fashion, may be limited. More modern systems, yeah, sure, they can. Maybe they have an API where you can rotate API credentials that are expired, right, or something like that. But a lot of these systems that you might encounter in the wild, maybe they've been there for 10 years, right? And you're inheriting it. So I think it's the classic case of it depends. But fortunately, I think the new wave of security solutions that I'm seeing, they pay proper attention to having a good API, right? And maybe even a command line interface. Woohoo, right? Wouldn't that be nice, right? So I think these are things that can enable the DevSecOps movement. Even if it was a marketing stunt. I think there are barriers, maybe melting away barriers, but there's still all kinds of places, inside like Elastic Cloud. The security folks had to put in a ton of infra to get FedRAMP certified. And I mean, ridiculous amounts of infrastructure in order to pass the annual, recertification. It turns out you need monthly reports. To get the monthly reports, it turns out you need daily reports. And that kind of continuous compliance, like it takes the discipline. And I think modern systems maybe introduce this possibility more, but you don't always get the luxury of working with modern systems, do you? Right.
Yeah, and one of the examples of those systems, and that will be another shameless plug, is JFrog X-Ray. That is that's the security team, the security tool for DevOps or for DevSecOps if you wish. And our main focus is to, as we both mentioned, to bake the security into the pipeline. Now, if you say, well, I don't have the luxury to work with it, the good news are that the security tools are external to our code. They are internal to our pipeline, but we can involve our pipeline furiously without being as cautious as we are in, let's say, replacing dependencies in our code, been frightening that it will break anything or whatever, right? So if we need to replace Spring now, that'll be a disaster. If we need to replace an old security scanner with a new one, that should be much less dangerous and actually should provide us with great benefits. Does it make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Cool. All right. Anyone else? Comment, question, thought that they'd like to share? All right. Well, wait, got one late breaker. There we go.
Does that change the usual composition of a Scrum team? Well, it does a little bit. It does and it doesn't. It does when it changes the composition of the engineers on the Scrum team, because the empowered team includes people from operations and from product and from security. But the essence of the Scrum team, that it is an empowered team by definition, actually only strengthens by DevOps, and its importance only becomes more obvious that this team should be able to provide value from all the perspectives, and we need to be able to work together. What do you think having DevOps in the job title? Well, depends DevOps what. As I already mentioned, for me, DevOps doesn't mean that DevOps engineer don't make any sense, because DevOps is about collaboration. So DevOps engineer makes as much sense as a collaboration engineer. But you might have DevOps, maybe DevOps Advocate in the title, because this is an important role, especially in bigger organizations. You might have a full-time job enabling DevOps and breaking down silos and speaking to people, change their behavior, etc., etc. But then it's not very technical role. It's actually a role of a mediator, of a communication specialist, of someone that teaches people working together. But DevOps engineer, I don't understand what it means. Being T-shaped, yes, being T-shaped is the idea that you still have DevOps doesn't mean that everybody now have to do everything perfectly, because it's impossible. Instead, being T-shaped means that you have your area of expertise as you are a developer now, but you also understand broader concepts on your left and right. You understand how to implement security in the pipeline. Not all the details, but you got the idea of how it works. You understand how your code is being deployed. Again, you don't have to understand everything about Kubernetes, but you understand how the containers work and how orchestration of the containers work. What is the difference between the pod and the container or whatever, right? And et cetera, et cetera. So you have your narrow your narrow specialization, but you also have this broad part as you understand everything else. And one of the concepts which is not optional is your business, the business of your company. Why are you doing what you are doing? Who you try to help, and how what you are doing will help them. Oh, thank you for the compliment for the background. It's actually a background of our podcast, the DevOps Speakeasy. We have this concept of speakeasy at the bar, and we interview amazing DevOps people. So you can find it on, it streams live on @JFrog Twitter with Periscope, and then it's on YouTube of JFrog YouTube, and also on Podbean or any other podcast platform that you use under DevOps Speakeasy. So if you want to hear us, me and Kat Cosgrove chat with a bunch of amazing DevOps people, feel free to subscribe. DevOps Speakeasy.
I love the fact that the neon blinks, you know,
Right, right.
on the bar sides. That's a nice touch.
Yeah, thank you.
Got another question from Lee.
What can you say about cloud and DevOps? Interesting. I start getting this question a lot recently. And the answer is, while cloud computing is definitely depends on successful DevOps implementation, cloud computing or cloud native is not a prerequisite of DevOps. You can successfully implement DevOps in whatever environment you work, being it cloud, hybrid, your data center, or a tiny proof of concept, a minimal valuable product that is run on a desktop under your desk. It doesn't matter. Cloud native is not prerequisite of DevOps. Well, I'm not in the cloud, so I cannot do DevOps. It's not a valid excuse.
All right, folks. One last call for questions or conversation. Okay. Well, listen, thanks again. Oh, no, got it. Thanks, Lee. Appreciate that. Please, feel free to, we haven't announced our next meetup yet. Planning has been a little bit difficult with everything, but we're trying to get back to a regular cadence of Zooms. You're welcome to hit me up on Twitter if you would like to be a presenter and talk about something you're doing. You'd be, a lot of people might think, oh, user community doesn't, they just want to hear from these dev evangelists. A lot of times what you're doing at your company can be surprisingly interesting to folks. So even if you think you have nothing to say, I challenge that, and we welcome first-time presenters as well. It's a very friendly environment. As you can see, we're pretty informal here as well. And want to thank you for your time and attention. We'll be posting the link. I'll broadcast it out via meetup.com as soon as the talk link is available. And look forward to seeing you at a future San Francisco Java Users Group. Baruch, thank you very much for coming to do this.
Peter, thank you for having me. That's my third time, by the way, in San Francisco JAG. Hopefully not the last.
Definitely not the last. And appreciate you and the time you spent with us this evening. Take care. Be safe, everyone, please. And remember, if you are in Alameda County, there was a lockdown tonight. So, pay attention.
Stay home, stay safe.
Yeah, stay home, stay safe. Pay attention to your emergency broadcasts and all that. All right. Take care, everyone.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.